Welcome to Theater Talk. I'm Ed Shopes.
I'm Ann McBride, and we're here the first and third Fridays of the month to tell you all about what's happening in the Mid-Willamette Valley theater world.
On today's show, we'll talk with director Charlotte Headrick and two actors from Eclipsed, a drama about the women of Ireland's Magdelene Laundry, opening March 1st at Albany Civic Theatre.
And in our second interview segment, we'll talk with Western Oregon University director Michael Phillips and actors from the acclaimed Broadway musical Spring Awakening, coming to the Rice Auditorium February 29th through March 9th.
But first, we want to talk to you a little bit about KMUZ's Winter Pledge Drive. Usually, KMUZ pledge drives are all about keeping the lights on and the antenna humming at your listener-supported community radio station, but this time we're asking you to support our Power Up campaign.
Remember the nasty ice storm we had late last year? Well, a big piece of falling ice seriously damaged our antenna, making KMUZ difficult to tune in by radio. And while we're truly grateful for everyone who is tuned in to live streaming KMUZ Theater Talk and listening to our podcast, we really need to get KMUZ back on the air or lose our FCC broadcast license.
So this time, our Winter Pledge Drive goal is to raise $25,000, it's a lot of money for us, to replace our broken antenna and our old underpowered transmitter, just so KMUZ can return to the airwaves stronger than ever.
We want you to understand there is an urgent need for you to donate. Call 503-990-6101 to say you will, or go to kmuz.org and click Pledge to your favorite show and choose KMUZ Theater Talk.
We'll talk more about our Power Up campaign later, but first, Anne, why don't you start us off with our Theater Talk calendar?
Albany Civic Theatre at albanycivic.org. Coming to ACT March 1st through 9th is Eclipsed, a play about the Magdelene Laundries in Ireland, directed by Charlotte J. Headrick. We'll talk with her and two actors from Eclipsed on our first interview in today's program.
Children's Educational Theater is at cetsalem.org, and online registrations are now open for CET's 5-week summer theater experience for students from grades 3 through 12. Go to cetsalem.org to secure a spot now for your kiddos.
The Elsinore Theater at elsinoretheater.com for information about local events and touring shows on stage at the Elsinore. Go to their website and Facebook page.
Gallery Theater is at gallerytheater.org, and See How They Run, directed by Britt Block, is on the gallery stage through March 3rd. It's a British farce set in a quiet vicarage where its characters rush headlong into humor and through lots of doors. It's filled with zany antics, mistaken identity, a small pack of vicars, one of whom is an escaped convict in hiding, and a sedate bishop who's shocked by all the goings-on. So be ready for a laughter-filled evening. And Romeo and Juliet, Choose Your Own Ending, opens at Gallery Theater March 22nd and runs through April 7th.
Kaiser Homegrown Theater at kaiserhomegrowntheater.org. They are doing Bowing, and it's on stage at Kaiser Homegrown Theater through February 25th. This 1960s French farce is about an American living in Paris who is engaged to 3 different flight attendants on different airlines until it all goes wrong. Get your tickets on the Kaiser Homegrown Theater website, and you can hear our interview with director Jeff Minden on our KMUZ Theater Talk podcast. Kaiser Homegrown's second show is Silent Sky by Lauren Gunderson, coming up April 12th through 28th.
The Majestic Theater is on Facebook and at majestic.org. And Majestic Readers Theater presents The Tragedy of Antony and Cleopatra by William Shakespeare, February 24th and 25th. Then The Revolutionist by playwright Lauren Gunderson and directed by Lee Matthews Bach runs March 8th through 17th at the Majestic Theater. We'll have an interview with the director on our next Theater Talk program.
Pinnacle Theater at pinnacletheater.org. Up next at Pinnacle is The Prom, a musical by Magdelene, Martin, and Sklar. It's directed by Robert Sahlberg and runs March 1st through 23rd. Open auditions for the drama Boy Gets Girl by Rebecca Gilman will be held March 16th at Pinnacle Theater's downtown Salem rehearsal studio. It's directed at Pinnacle Theater by Emily Loberg, and you can find out more info on Pinnacle Theater's online audition page and on Facebook. And Joe Dodge's acting workshop for actors 18 and older is at Pinnacle Theater's rehearsal studio in downtown Salem. To sign up, go to tickets.pinnacletheater.org.
The Salem Playhouse is at thesalemplayhouse.com, and Salem Playhouse also offers acting classes for both kids and adults, and they're held at Kaiser Homegrown Theater, and adult-only classes held at Chemeketa Community College. To sign up, go to thesalemplayhouse.com and click on the Classes tab.
Spotlight Community Theater at spotlightcommunitytheater.org. Coming to Spotlight May 9th through 19th is Much Ado Out West by Wade Bradford and directed by Shannon Rempel.
Struts and Frets Theater Company at strutsandfretstheater.org will present Little Women March 28th through 30th at the Dallas Event Center. It's adapted from the Louisa May Alcott classic novel by prolific playwright Kate Hamill and directed at Struts and Frets by Terry Kitagawa.
Now for the colleges, Corbin University at corbin.edu/theater-arts. Coming up March 7th through 17th, Corbin will stage Sleeping Beauty Briar Rose, based on the tales of Charles Perrault and the Brothers Grimm. Director Jeremiah Price joins us on our March 1st KMUZ Theater Talk program with the details.
Western Oregon University Theater is at wou.edu/theater, and Spring Awakening runs February 29th through March 9th at Western. Set in the late 19th century Germany, Spring Awakening tells the story of teenagers discovering their budding sexuality through a folk-infused alternative rock score. It's directed by Michael Phillips, who joins us later on today's program, along with two actors from the show. And then May 29th through June 1st, John Proctor is the Villain will be on stage at the Rice Auditorium, and that show's directed by Risa Fleming.
Willamette University at wutheater.com. Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind, 30 plays in 60 minutes, directed by Jonathan Cole, continues through February 25th at the Pelton Theater on Willamette's campus in Salem. The audience gets to pick which plays the actors will perform each evening. That's followed by Brian Friel's Irish family masterwork, Dancing at Lunasa, directed by Susan Coramel, April 11th through 27th.
At the high schools, Dallas High School is on Facebook at Dallas High School Thespians and Theater. They're producing The Wizard of Oz. It runs February 22nd through 24th at Dallas High. See their Facebook page for show and ticket information.
McKay High School on Facebook at McKay Thespians. Their spring musical at McKay will be Little Shop of Horrors, May 10th through 18th.
McNary High School is on Facebook at Ken Collins Theater. Shakespeare's classic Twelfth Night runs May 15th through 18th at McNary.
North Salem High School on Facebook at NSHS Theater. They will be doing Tuck Everlasting, and that will be on stage at North April 11th through 20th. And that's followed by Sense and Sensibility playing May 23rd through 25th.
South Salem High School is on Facebook at Saxon Drama. The Alibis plays in the Rose Theater at South High, February 29th through March 2nd. And then on March 8th and 9th is an evening of original devised works.
Sprague High School is doing Bye Bye Birdie, and it's on stage February 22nd through March 2nd at Sprague, and one acts happen on April 11th through 20th.
Staten High School is on Facebook at Staten High School Theater. Staten High will stage the pop musical Mamma Mia March 1st through 3rd, featuring the music of ABBA.
West Salem High School on Facebook at West Salem Drama Department. Shakespeare favorite, Much Ado About Nothing, runs February 29th through March 2nd at West Salem High. That wraps up our KMUZ Theater Talk calendar for plays around the Mid-Willamette Valley.
Coming up next, Anne and I talk with director Charlotte Headrick and actors Diane Slamp and Leslie Hogan from Eclipsed, a drama about the women of the Magdelene Laundry in Ireland. We'll be back with more KMUZ Theater Talk right after this short break.
Before we go on to our next interview, we want to tell you a little bit more about KMUZ's Winter Pledge Drive. Both Ed and I really believe in KMUZ Community Radio and KMUZ Theater Talk. We want to keep bringing you the latest in theater news and interviews with directors and actors and more throughout the Mid-Willamette Valley. We think it's important that you hear all the latest news and great interviews with the creative people who make up your theater community.
But we can't bring KMUZ Theater Talk your way without a working antenna and a strong radio signal. Now, our antenna got trashed by falling ice late last year, and the FCC requires us to restore our KMUZ 100.7 FM broadcast signal by July 21st. That's right, this July 21st. So our goal this pledge drive is to raise $25,000 for a new antenna and a stronger transmitter. And that's where you come in. KMUZ is your commercial-free, all-volunteer community radio station. Ann and I produce KMUZ Theater Talk for listeners just like you from throughout the Mid-Willamette Valley. So please, help us keep KMUZ Theater Talk and the rest of our great programming on the air by going to kmuz.org right now. Click on Pledge to your favorite show, choose KMUZ Theater Talk, and support our Power Up campaign by making a monthly contribution that fits your budget. Or call 503-990-6101 to talk with one of our Pledge Drive volunteers. That's 503-990-6101. And thanks for listening to and supporting KMUZ Theater Talk.
We're talking with director Charlotte Headrick and actors Diane Slamp and Leslie Hogan from the play Eclipsed, which is opening at the Albany Civic Theatre March 1st and playing through the 9th. Welcome to Theater Talk, you guys.
It's good to be here.
Thanks.
This play is really important, but I don't think the title doesn't describe what it is. So maybe, Charlotte, you could describe what it is.
Mother Victoria, at one point in the play, talks about that they are all eclipsed. And I think from her viewpoint, from the church, these women are blotted out. They're not important. They're eclipsed.
Tell us about the women that are living in this place and a little bit about the history of where this play came from.
This is one of the great sadnesses of the Irish Catholic Church. These women were incarcerated and they were slave labor. They were bondwomen. They were working for the church. They got a pittance of money, and they were put in by various people, sometimes employers, sometimes a relative. The sad story of this is that the women could have left at any time. They were there illegally, but they didn't know that. There's history that show that some women were put into the laundries. They weren't pregnant. They were put in there because they were just too pretty and they knew they would get in trouble. And so as a way to stopgap that, they just incarcerated them in the laundries.
And my understanding is that it started as they were prostitutes.
A long time ago, but then it went from prostitution to unwed mothers.
When you say, Charlotte, a long time ago, for how long did this slave labor exist in Ireland?
I don't remember I've met the expert on Irish prostitution who talks about this, but it goes back to the 19th century. And there were homes that to rehabilitate the prostitutes, but then it morphed into these homes for unwed mothers. And the last one was closed in, I don't know, 1993, 1996, which is just appalling. There's a 60 Minutes documentary that was done in 1998, 99 on the Magdalene Laundries, and there's been a film, but this play predates them all.
The Ulster Magdalene Asylum was founded in 1839 and it closed in 1916. But there were similar institutions that were run by Catholics and Presbyterians throughout Ireland. And these were primarily for fallen women, as they were described.
But it devolved into someone who maybe flirted with someone, and her parents put her away. It wasn't necessarily bad girls. I know that Sinead O'Connor spent some time.
Yes, she did. And Patricia Burke-Brogan, I knew the playwright. I knew her quite well. And I've done lots of work on this play and on her. She was quite a remarkable person. She died 2 years ago, and she was a novice, and she was sent to one of these, well, the one in Galway. And that experience in that laundry, it marked Patricia for life. She never forgot it. And she wrote a short story about the experience. And she was encouraged to take the short story and to turn it into a play, which she did. And in 1992, the Punchbag Theatre Company did it in Ireland. And we're very fortunate because I know one of the original actresses from that production, the original Bridget. And whenever I have a question about the play, I just send an email to Orla McGovern and say, Orla, what did you do? And she sends it back to me. It's great to have that connection.
Could you describe the plot and the characters?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a story that parallels so many different ones because it's basically how you are trying to get around the great ruse. A church or maybe a large, powerful entity is dictating the morality of a people. And the way they approach it is so divisive with families that it destroys lives. And the people that turn in these women feel like they're doing the greater good by God. There's so many parallels in modern society to this story. This is an interesting way to sit back and kind of look at that situation and extrapolate it to what's going on in everyday life. And I think getting back to the title of the play, Eclipsed, the church is basically the giant shadow over these women's lives, that the only way that they can see the sun again is to escape. And it's a story of escape, not just physically getting out of that situation, but also, as Charlotte had mentioned, the rich fantasy life of these ladies trying to create a life that they want to live. And they really rely on each other on creating these situations that they can emotionally check out from the work they're doing, the slavery that they are doing. It's quite touching and heartbreaking too.
It's not just the church. The state was in collusion with the church to get these babies out of the country. The church has not apologized, but the state has apologized. But these women were supposed to get restitution, some money, but I don't know that that's ever happened yet.
Now, Leslie, you are playing a bad guy?
Well put. Yeah.
So you have to espouse the idea of the Magdalene Laundries to these people.
Yes. And Charlotte touched on this. The religious people in this play, the women, the Mother Superior, the nuns, they are taking a vow of obedience, of blind obedience. And so that's exactly what we do. We espouse the rules, we obey the fathers of the church. We're not, according to our vows, we're not permitted to think for ourselves. And that is a terrible thing when you put a woman like Mother Superior in charge of a laundry, in charge of human beings who are desperate to be out, and you don't give her the power to think for herself. That is a recipe for tragedy, which is what happens, because of course she becomes an immoral person. She's just hewing to doctrine without thinking for herself in a situation where mercy is required, and she is not allowed to show mercy. And shockingly, it is great fun. What does that say about me?
And she's really good at it.
So to me, this is a play about submission and obedience and a culture of keeping women apart.
It's also a play about defiance, as we find out in Bridget.
And about, yes, life force. Life will happen even under these conditions.
Many times in plays, when there's a conflict that's as big as this, there's some kind of redemptive turn at the end, or a possibility of redemption. Charlotte, does that exist in this particular script?
Sister Virginia is the person who I'd say is the redeemer, and she's the troubled young nun who is under Mother Victoria, and she is, like I said, I think that's Patricia's voice. She's the questioner. She's questioning, and of course, Mother Victoria does not want her questioning. She tells her she has to be obedient and abide by the rule. And the characters, Nellie Nora ends up spending her whole life there, as we know women did. They never left the laundry. They stayed there their whole lives. And Mandy is mentally ill, and she has been severely damaged by this experience. And then we have young Juliet, who comes in, who again wants to spend her life in the laundry. She's the daughter of one of the penitents, and her mother has died, and she's gone to the orphanage, but then she's transferred from the orphanage into the laundry.
Tell us how you're approaching the design elements in this show, like the set, costumes, lighting, and all, to tell this story. How are you setting it on the Albany Civic stage?
So we're setting it in period, and Julie is basing the costumes on what we know they looked like, and that's true of the nuns' habits too. The set it's realistic and abstract at the same time, and we're incorporating elements of laundry into the set. Both with the actors working on the laundry, and then the projections are going to be projected on laundry pieces. So,
wow.
Yeah,
That sounds wonderful.
John Sams is doing the set. Yeah. This is my second time directing this play. I directed this play in 99 at Western Kentucky University, and at Indiana University it traveled. So it's near and dear to my heart. And I really am doing this as a tribute to Patricia.
What do you think is the biggest challenge, Charlotte, in presenting such an emotionally arresting story?
Right off the top is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that is the accent work. We've got to do the accent work and be as true to that as we possibly can.
And you have someone coaching you.
Yeah, we've had it. Emmett Whitaker is the only Irishman, I think, in Benton County. And and Emmett is great. And Emmett, when I asked him to do this, one of the first things that came out of his mouth was, "This is such an important play." It's been done all over the world. It has been translated into multiple languages. It's had productions all over this country. And in fact, there was an earlier production here, which had one of the youngest cast to ever do this play, was done at Corvallis High School, and Rick Wallace directed it.
Wow.
And that was maybe in 2000, something like that. He wanted to challenge his actors at the high school, and he did this play.
The accent work was definitely a challenge, but really trying to, this is an unrelatable experience. I mean, the depth of it is, it's taken a lot of thought, a lot of research. It feels like a great responsibility to be able to share this story in a way that is impactful.
It would be hard to, you wouldn't want to screw it up.
That's the goal.
I would say too that Charlotte has helped take some of the challenge out. She and our assistant director, Johanna Spencer, have given us links to that put us right in contact with the stories of women who have birth penitence and the impact of this, their stories from the laundry and their life once the laundry's closed, and how they've been impacted. It gives you an empathy, which of course makes it easier to act in this play.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is Elvis Presley and his impact on the story. Does that sound out of left field?
No, that's as Mandy, who is so emotionally damaged, mentally. She's not well. And I think, and her fellow penitents sort of look out for Mandy because they know she's not all there. And she has become obsessed, and her escape is Elvis Presley.
And I've been thinking about this, Charlotte, why Elvis Presley? And I think, I don't know if Patricia picked him for a particular reason other than he was very popular at that point in time, but what Elvis symbolized in his approach to music and why he became popular, in some ways is relatable for these women that are incarcerated, because they just want to be seen for who they are.
Yeah.
Which is what makes them special. The same way Elvis, he showed his authentic self and he was accepted for it.
He swiveled those hips.
I would, yeah. And
Yes.
I'd like to say that these women are being told they have to suppress their sexuality. And Elvis Presley, he got notoriety because he was flaunting his. It's a nice juxtaposition.
That's very true. Also, he's been fairly popular in Ireland. There's a really well-known song called Galway to Graceland about a woman who leaves her husband and goes to Graceland and abases herself on his grave.
Charlotte, what do you hope that audiences are going to take away from this show? It's an emotional story. It's a long story in terms of history. It's an important story in terms of the impact of the Irish Church on women. What do you hope modern audiences are going to take away from this play?
We're doing this play in March, which is Women's History Month. And as I have written about this play, it is reclaiming women's history. And women's history is all of our history. And that we need to know this. We need to know where these people have been and where we're going, and say never again, because I'm going to say something, and I know in Lynn County, I'm probably, if you want to edit it out, you can, but I'm going to say it, that I am convinced Patricia's play had national tours, multiple national tours over the years since she wrote the play. And it played at the Edinburgh Festival. And right now, the reproductive rights in Ireland are better than they are in the United States. And I am convinced that this play had something to do with that. I can't prove it. I'm not a sociologist and I don't do that kind of research, but I'm convinced of this. And I think that the play tells a story about redemption and survival.
I have been a fan of this play since I was lucky enough to be on the play reading committee for Albany Civic when it was introduced. And it is such an important story that everybody needs to know about it and understand the repercussions of blind obedience in this story, but also in modern society, that blind obedience can lead to no good. And I just think it's important for people to absorb the story. I think it's an important story to tell.
We just have to think through the issues that were presented and stand up for what we've determined is right, which is exactly what Sister Virginia does.
I would like to say we're going to have a talk back after the matinee. Everybody's welcome to come to talk back, and we're going to have people from the community there to talk about the play. I'm very proud of these actors. I'm very proud of this production.
Eclipsed is a powerful, powerful story, and it's an award-winning play with dozens of productions done around the world, as we've heard today. It's set in a Magdelene laundry in the 1960s in Ireland, where the women are basically held captive by the Irish Catholic Church just for being women. This is an important story for everyone to see. It's at Albany Civic Theatre, and the play Eclipsed is written by Patricia Burke-Brogan, directed by Charlotte Headrick, who has been our guest today. Performances are March 1st through the 9th, and you can get tickets at albanycivic.org. Thank you so much, Director Charlotte Headrick and actor Diane Slamp and actor Leslie Hogan, for joining us here on Theater Talk.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you
That's
very
good.
much.
Joining us in our next interview to tell us about Spring Awakening, the musical coming to Western Oregon University, February 29th through March 9th, are director Michael Phillips and actors Kelsey, Wallace, and Jacob Fritts. Stay with us. KMUZ Theater Talk continues right after this short break.
We talked earlier in today's program about KMUZ's urgent need for a new antenna and transmitter, and the FCC says that for KMUZ to keep its broadcast license, we must restore 100.7 FM broadcast signal by July 21st this year. Our need is urgent. Our timeline is short, and our goal is big. We must raise $25,000 to replace our antenna and transmitter by July 21st. And here's where you come in. Please call 503-990-6101 to support our Power Up campaign with a monthly donation that fits your budget. Or go to kmuz.org and click on Pledge to Your Favorite Show and choose KMUZ Theater Talk.
Ann and I bring you KMUZ Theater Talk twice a month, but we only have 3 pledge drives a year at KMUZ Community Radio. So now's the time to donate by calling 503-990-6101. That's 503-990-6101. Or go to the kmuz.org webpage, click on Pledge to Your Favorite Show, and choose KMUZ Theater Talk. We want to keep interviewing all the artists, performers, and creatives from shows playing at theaters throughout the Mid-Willamette Valley. But to do that, KMUZ must meet the FCC's requirement to replace our antenna and restore our 100.7 FM signal that reaches our entire licensed broadcast area and you, our listeners.
Now's the time. Please call 503-990-6101 right now to support our Power Up campaign with a monthly donation that fits your budget. Or go to kmuz.org and click on Pledge to Your Favorite Show and choose KMUZ Theater Talk. And thank you for supporting your all-volunteer, commercial-free community radio station. We would not be on the air without your support. We're talking with Michael Phillips, who is directing the musical Spring Awakening at Western Oregon University, opening February 29th and playing through March 9th. And he's brought some actors with him, Jacob Fritts and Kelsey, Wallace. Welcome to Theater Talk, guys.
Thanks for inviting us.
Michael, this play was written before the last century. It's really an interesting play, however, even for the modern era. What attracted you to Spring Awakening as a director?
Well, this is my second time directing it. I directed it 10 years ago at Western also. So I obviously really liked the piece. It is, as you mentioned, it was written in the late 1800s by Frank Wedekind. And it was controversial then, and it's somewhat still controversial now, but it was very controversial in the late 1800s. In fact, it didn't get its first production until 1906. So it took 15 years after he wrote it to get it produced. And for a college production, and it's a good age range. Most of the characters in the play are in their teens. And so it's not a huge stretch for college age students to play it. The music and the musical version of it, which is what we're doing, is just gorgeous. So yeah, we decided to revisit it after a 10-year break.
When was the original play transformed into a musical version?
The original Broadway production of it was in 2006, so exactly 100 years after the first production of it.
And you say it's a controversial topic. Why is that?
Frank Wedekind was exploring the idea that that most young people were being told nothing at all about human sexuality, nothing at all about reproduction. They were being kept in the dark. And so the play explores this group of young teenagers who are struggling to kind of figure out their own sexuality and the moral code that society had about that. And so it's pretty direct about some of those topics. It's not a play that doesn't have, well, let me put it this way. It touches on a number of subjects that are still kind of controversial today. I mean, we know that sex ed is not universal, and there's a lot of places that don't really teach it very well. The play also deals with things like suicide and abortion and some of those topics that you wouldn't normally associate with the Broadway musical, but this one has all of that.
And the subject of suicide is so now. This is what we're all interested in and trying to prevent. And it's interesting that it could be 19th century or 20th century or 21st century. It's still a tormented young man taking his own life.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that in many ways, this entire play feels very modern, and not just because of the music, but because it's still dealing with topics that young people in particular deal with all the time. Not only the issues of sexuality in the play, and not only the issues of suicide, but there's issues about sexual orientation. There's issues. It's just filled with things that is amazing to me that a playwright in 1890 wrote this. And the musical follows the original play very closely. What the musical does is adds music to it, but it's really based on the play and follows it very closely.
Jacob and Kelsey, how do you feel about playing these characters?
And what characters are you guys playing?
I'm playing Melchior, who is the male lead, and I really enjoy playing him. He's very interesting in the fact that every other kid and youth in the show doesn't know anything about sex, and they know nothing about reproduction and anything. He is the only one who does. His mom, it is stated, teaches him everything and allows him to read books on the subject and stuff. So he's the only one who knows anything. And because of that, it seems that everyone kind of looks up to him and looks to him for guidance, which plays into this big self-worth and self-importance thing that Melchior has, which leads to the other things happening in the show. And it just really snowballs. And I think it's really interesting.
Isn't he an atheist also?
He is. Yeah. Everyone else is Catholic.
And how does that feature in the play?
He's a very angsty teen who thinks he has it all figured out, and he likes to go on his little tangents about how society and the world is messed up and how we're failing the kids and how we're failing everyone. And a lot of that has to do with his views on religion and his atheism. So I think that's cool also.
And Kelsey, Vendla goes through a lot of changes in the play. Can you talk to that?
She is a very complicated character, I would say. She is very curious and she wants to learn, what's out there. And I think that's what draws her to Melchior, because she knows that he knows everything and she's not getting that from the adults in her life. And so that's really what she wants.
Doesn't the play open with her talking to her mother and saying, what happens?
Her older sister has just had another baby, and she's asking her mom, like, this is the second time that this has happened to someone in my life, and I still don't understand how it's happening. And her mom is just too embarrassed to even talk to her about it.
And she ends up getting pregnant.
Yes.
Speaking of the plot, Michael, can you just give us a kind of a quick idea of the scope of the play and what it's about?
It really does center around this question of knowledge and how these kids either gain it or don't. So most of the play is based in that. It really is Vendela's journey from knowing nothing at all to knowing how it happens and how reproduction happens. And as you said, she ends up pregnant in the play, and the consequences of that socially that happen with her. But there's also subplots. The Moritz character is the character who is struggling in school and is trying to figure out how his life is going to go, and it's not going well. And so there's all those kinds of what you would expect teenagers to be going through are all in this play. Melchior, I'm sorry, at one point gets sent away to a reformatory, right? And his experience there is dealt with in the play. So it's all of those things. And what the musical does is takes the idea of the story from the 1890s and marries it with very contemporary rock music. And the idea is almost that when they sing, they suddenly are in a different world where they can express themselves and be who they are. And it's almost like stepping out of the play and into a rock concert, and then it steps right back into the play, and you just keep going. And it's quite an interesting combination of ideas here.
Well, that keeps it more relevant, I think, to the modern world, if you will, because if you just think about the topic and it's like, okay, these kids knew next to nothing about sex and sexuality and the changes that they were about to face becoming an adult. But today, the internet has everything.
Yeah, it does. Although, we were with my theater company that was doing a show about sex ed a few years ago. We were doing research and finding just across the country how varied sexual health information is for a lot of teenagers. In some states, it's really robust and they learn all about reproduction. And in some states, it's barely touched on at all. And so there's not a standardized kind of information set that students of that age can get. And it really depends on where you live, what state you live in, and how robust the sexual education is there. But
who your parents are.
Who your parents are too, right?
Because, there are still people who don't want to talk to their daughters about sex and make up, silly things.
Yep. So it does feel quite relevant still today, even over 100 years later.
How are you staging this?
We're staging it with the audience on stage with us, so they're very close, with a small band right there, kind of all in the space together. So it's going to be fun and intimate.
So in the 10 years since you directed this show previously, Michael, what have you thought about that you're bringing to this production that wasn't in the previous one?
Yeah, excellent question. I think that in the meantime, like I mentioned before, my theater company did this show about sex ed that we toured around for a while. And that's happened in between these two productions. And I think that I just became more and more convinced that the relevancy of the show was still present and still immediate. And so, and the last time I directed it, we directed it in the big auditorium with the audience out in the house, and it wasn't up close and personal. And this time I really wanted to kind of focus on the intimate nature of the show and kind of confront the issue both with the characters and with the audience of how important and relevant these topics still are. So moving the audience up on the stage is making it a completely different experience than it was before. We staged kind of big in the last show, and now everything's pretty tight and pretty small. And it's going to be a completely different feel, I think.
I really liked the previous production very much. I really was thinking, well, how's it going to be different? What am I going to notice? And I think bringing the audience in with the actors to be more intimate is a very good choice. Kelsey and Jacob, when you're having your experience on stage as an actor, what do you think the audience is going to bring to you as an actor in performance? Let's start with Kelsey on this one.
I would say it's going to help bring a lot of energy, especially during some of like the bigger like group numbers that are more like high energy. Having people be so close to us is really going to help like fuel the energy. But then also I think it can add to the layer of like awkwardness and uncomfortableness that happens in some of the scenes, just having people be so close to you. And so I think that will be really interesting to see how that impacts what we're doing on stage.
And not to mention that you're probably going to have friends and relatives in the audience. So how's that going to be for you, Jacob, to have friends and relatives in the audience in a show about human sexuality where you're playing lead role?
I have already had many conversations with my family about this. I have properly warned all of them what will be going on.
Good.
Yeah, and both my sets of grandparents have decided to bow out for this one, and they said they will not be coming, which I said that's probably fair. But my parents and my friends will be there, and I am excited. I think that it is kind of an awkward show and thing to do in front of like family and friends like that. But I also think that that will make it more impactful to those people. They'll see me, someone they know so well in these situations, and they'll be like, oh, this could happen to anyone. This is something that happens every day.
I just think it's so immediate when it's right close. How big are we talking about the set and the audience?
Yeah, the set has a big wall in the back, but the set itself is just a platform. And our ASL interpreters are going to be right on stage with us, and the band's going to be on stage with us. So it's not a huge space for the action. It's pretty tight. And then I think we've got seating for about 100 audience members, maybe a little bit more. It's all fitting right up on the stage, everybody up there together. So it's a pretty small performance space, and that's okay. It's only a 13-member cast, so it's not like it's a huge cast. And
yes, but I'm thinking of those wonderful group numbers where they're in your face.
They will be very close. I think there's about 4 feet from the first row to the edge of the stage, edge of the platform. So it's not right up on top of us, but it's close. And that just makes for a very intimate setting. You can kind of pare things down and make it more realistic and believable, even though it's a musical.
It's really important, the subject matter of this show. And it's really great that you're in your face telling them, because this is important stuff.
Even in the original Broadway production, and we did this, Ed, you might remember if you saw the production 10 years ago, we did the same thing. There was a bank of audience seats that was right up on the stage, even in the original Broadway production. And they were trying to get to the idea that this was a show about intimacy and was an intimate show. It's hard to do that in a huge house like a Broadway theater or even Rice Auditorium. So they were trying to kind of get to it by putting a small bank of audience up on stage, but we're just going to put the whole audience up on stage. That's the only difference here.
That will be great.
So it's going to be Western's version of the Thomas Theater at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, right?
Yeah, well, we do that with a lot of our shows. We kind of make Rice for smaller, more intimate shows. We put the audience up on stage at Rice and make it into a black box. So,
yeah, I think that's a really cool choice. You get a different impression really up close in a more intimate black box theater. You can literally feel the heat of the performance because it is a stronger relationship, I think, between actors and audience.
I could not agree more. I love intimate theater. I love small theaters. And when I go to OSF, my favorite space is the small Thomas Theater.
So Jacob and Kelsey, is this your first opportunity to play in a small space like this, or have you been in a more intimate setting at Western before?
I've done a couple shows that were more intimate at Western. The first one that comes to mind is when we did You're in Town a couple years back. I played Bobby in that, and the audience was on stage and pretty close to us. So it was pretty intimate then.
For me, this is only my third show that I've been like in the cast for at Western, and both the other two shows that I were in were big main stage with audience in the house. So this would be my first time doing anything like this here.
Well, listeners, the musical Spring Awakening plays at Western Oregon University's Rice Auditorium, opening February 29th, and it plays through March 9th. There's more information on the Western Oregon University Theater and Dance website. You can get tickets at www.tix.com and search for Western Oregon University and Spring Awakening. You'll find ticket links there. Thank you so much, Michael Phillips, the director, and Jacob Fritts and Kelsey Wallace, actors from the show. It's been a real pleasure talking to you guys on Theater Talk.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, real pleasure talking to you too.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's time to wind up today's KMUZ Theater Talk program. Thank you for joining us. Next week at 9 a.m., you can tune in to Talking About Art with Joel Zack. KMUZ Theater Talk is a proud member of the Mid-Valley Theater Network.
KMUZ Theater Talk comes your way at 9 a.m. the first and third Friday of the month on your radio or smart speaker at 100.7 and 88.5 FM, on your favorite radio app, or streaming live at kmuz.org. You can also listen to our KMUZ Theater Talk programs anytime, wherever you get your podcasts.
Ed and I will return March 1st with a brand new KMUZ Theater Talk program. Meanwhile, check our KMUZ Theater Talk Facebook page for news and updates about live theater in the Mid-Willamette Valley.
And if you haven't yet joined in our winter pledge drive to support Theater Talk and the rest of KMUZ's great community radio programs, please call 503-990-6101 right now to support our Power Up campaign with a monthly donation that fits your budget. That number again is 503-990-6101, or go to kmuz.org, click on the pledge to your favorite show, and choose KMUZ Theater Talk. And thanks. Until next time, we'll see you in the front row.